Again, if you would prefer to hear the workshop today in Korean, you can select on your computer screen, your Zoom screen, I'm sorry, at the bottom, close to the right of your screen, there's a globe. And if you click on that globe, you can select Korean to hear the translation. And thank you to Dr. Park again for translating for us into Korean. Would you all please, if you would, just introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us who you are, where you are, your connection to Central. If you are an alum and you're brave enough to share the year you graduated, please do that as well. I know we have some very recent graduates and some not so recent graduates, and we want to celebrate all of that. We are very pleased today to have back with us Reverend Dr. Young Lee Hertig to lead our first workshop of Centralized 2021. And she will be leading us in discovering Vashti and Esther as change agents. Mm-hmm. Young was introduced more fully yesterday in the panel, and her bio was distributed yesterday as well. So you can find more information there about her passions and her accomplishments. Though I think we'll hear some of those passions in this workshop today too. So I'd like to invite you to join me in giving a real or virtual round of applause to Dr. Hertig as she begins today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm waiting for your cue. Am I on?
You're up. Yeah, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
All right. I really enjoyed Dr. Sue Park's homily. And endurance, resilience, we all need it, particularly during this time of grief, death and dying, and age of uncertainty. And it's my pleasure to be with you all. I'm a fan of your president, Pam Durso, amazing woman of God, amazing leader. So my pleasure. Well, let me start with Matthew's 10:16 to go to the queens, Vashti and Esther, and you'll see why I'm doing that. And my presentation today basically is written up in this book, Mirrored Reflections, Reframing Biblical Characters. So it's the chapter title is called Subversive Banquets of Vashti and Esther. Two women were quite subversive in different ways. And we have a lot to learn from them. And contemporary parallel is hilarious. So can I assume that all of you heard about Vashti and Esther? In African-American community, there's even Bishop Mackenzie Vashti. But when I preach about Queen Vashti in Asian American settings, they've never heard of Vashti. But they've heard many times about Queen Esther, and many of, in fact, Asian American female names are after Esther. So in Matthew chapter 10:16, so I am sending you out like a sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise. I prefer be shrewd as serpent and innocent as doves. Seminary education, especially for women leaders, does a great job producing doves. And many pulpits in the churches highlight the women ought to be like doves, but we lack shrewdness like a serpent. And the reason why I chose Book of Esther, two queens as social change agent, two of them are women of risks and women of courage. as Dr. Park talked about courage, in fact, English word courage came from French word cœur, heart. So if our education is, I think, therefore I am, and totally reductionistic, as if our mind, body, and feelings and our values are all disconnected, then we are making a mistake. In fact, neuroscientists these days affirm and confirm what Chinese and Asians believed more than 3,000 years, that we even have memories stored in our bodies. Going back to Book of Esther, I don't know why those patriarchs canonized Book of Esther. Number one, it doesn't make any reference to God. And number two, there's first feminist banquet going on there. It's one thing to say no to the power, but it's another dimension of courage when you organize alternative banquet to the kings. That was what Queen Vashti did. When, unlike today, they had 7 days banquet followed by 180 days annual banquet with all the power elites from all regions. And at the peak of their drink, it was put politely, but what that meant is they had all kinds of mixed drinks. They list all different kinds of drinks. And you know what happened when they are gobbling all different mixed drinks at the peak of their drunkenness, basically. The King Xerxes fetched Queen Vashti. And when you read Hebrew words, my Hebrew is not fresh, but according to a Hebrew scholar friend who I co-edited this book, is basically you only show up with the crown. So innuendo is you show up naked to the drunken man wearing only the crown. Can you believe this? This happened every stinking year, annual banquet. And finally, Queen Vashti said, no, I'm not showing up to display my body and subjugate myself to all of your drunken men. No, thank you. You know what that meant? She risked her life by saying no. And to go further, she organized Palace Women's Banquet, alternative banquet to the kings. Talk about people on the margin coming together and organizing. Who owns Palace Women? King. They belong to king. They're not their own being, but talk about courage. She organized alternative to king's banquet after saying, no, thank you, I'm not showing up. Whoa. What's comical and what made me doubt and wonder about what was going on in the patriarch who canonized the Bible? The responses from the king and king's power elite is hilarious. They were afraid. They were afraid. What would happen? In fact, when you read Book of Esther, the power elite thought this is the end of patriarchy. You know why? What if all the wives follow this role model, this example? Then this will be the end of patriarchy. So what I mean by comical is that when you read responses, when the people on the margin organize and push back, the center has so much to lose. So they are afraid, literally. So their response, King's response is, let's organize lawyers, all the elites and councils, and even astrologists. And what are we going to do about it? Well, let's make sure we make a decree that nobody is to follow this example. Patriarchy has to be the law of the land. And let's even use vernacular languages. Make sure you translate native tongue of this decree. The patriarchy is alive and well. I just laughed so hard when I read that because of its parallel. We talked about helping the people on the margins. And when you help the people on the margin, when I was a youth pastor in an immigrant Korean church in LA, you are treated like a youth by the first generation. People you advocate for, you are reduced and your status goes down as people you advocate for. And Vashti was ready to die. And the legend said she didn't get killed. You know how many women navigate patriarchy? Through their son. She was able to enthrone her son as the successor of King Xerxes. And that's another whole 9 yards to discuss. Mother's favoritism to their son and discrimination against daughter. That still happens today. In a nutshell, that's Vashti's story. Very straightforward, and you can kill me, but I'm not going to be reduced as a prop to your party and show up to the drunken men's party. And number two, so I'm going to organize my own women's party. So I call it the first feminist banquet documented in the Bible. That's where if I perish, I perish. Even if I die today, I want to experience dignity as a human being. Let me contrast Vashti with Queen Esther. I'm sure she heard a lot about what went on, that infamous banquet of Vashti. And I don't know whether Central Baptist Seminary hosts a lot of banquets, but I have noticed many times a lot of politics happens in the banquet arena while gathering, and who is going to be seated at the center table, and hallway conversations, a lot of gossips. So-and-so is annoying. That faculty doesn't belong to our institution. You should fire her. All of that goes on in the banquet. There's a difference between Persian Queen Vashti and Jewish queen who entered into Persian palace as a Jew, and she hid her identity. But her beauty trumped her ethnicity and managed to hide her true identity and became the successor of Queen Vashti. One thing you can note in Book of Esther is that before she really became her own being as a queen, as the leader, with the help of Mordecai, her cousin, there's a partnership between Mordecai and Esther. A lot of times women who hang out with other fellow women leaders, there's something lacking. We need insider men to interpret, male ally to interpret male system. And Mordecai, step by step, coaches Queen Esther. But you know when the turning point comes? She was taking instruction from Mordecai, but finally, there's a definite turning point when she becomes her own being and leader. When she summons everybody in her circle to fast. That's called the Purim. And she asked all of people in the palace or outside the palace to pray. Fasting is, if you come from Asian traditions, it's sort of like a protest to God when you are in crisis. How many of you have practiced fasting? When do you fast? You can unmute. I don't want to just monologue. This is a workshop. When do you find yourself fasting?
When
I didn't get it because of the echo.
when I feel it's very hopeless and there's nothing I can do about it, I go to fasting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did it when we had a military coup happen in Burma.
Mm. Right. So during the moment of hopelessness and helplessness, right? No hope in sight, almost hoping against hope. Anybody else? I saw another hand. And this fasting tradition didn't just start with Christianity. It was in the culture already through Buddhism, you name it. And Christianity borrowed that and applied to Christian God. And we fast. My spiritual mentor fasted 100 days. And when he came down from the mountain, you know how in Korea there are prayer mountains everywhere. When he came down from the mountain after 100 days prayer, he looked like Moses. His countenance, there is a light shining. It was an amazing experience of him asking God and praying, God of the impossible. So I'm going to ask you sort of like an icebreaker question. This is not just gendered question. What I summarize Queen Vashti is in terms of her exterior, she's shrewd. And inwardly, she might be innocent. In Esther's case, she's externally coming across innocent and sweet, no harm intended. But inwardly, she's very shrewd. If you can make the most powerful man sleepless and wondering, what petition is she going to make? And he's losing sleep over it. And then he stumbles upon historical record book and found out the contribution Mordecai made. This book is nothing less than Shakespearean twists and turns. And how many banquets Esther organized? Not just one, 3 banquets. Series of banquets. And somebody might say she held her card close to her heart, didn't reveal or spill her gut. Step by step, she's meticulously delivering her agenda. When Mordecai found out King's right-hand man was plotting against Jews, genocide, and that's when she declares her leadership. And step by step, she's moving closer and closer. And there's a twist and turns, reversal taking place. There are a lot of conflict when you make a list of, is it wedding guest or some important events guest? And if you made to the one of the most important events guest list, you might feel that you are also VIP. That's what happened to Haman. Wow, I'm invited to Queen Esther's banquet, not just once, twice, 3 times. I mean, you can read the whole book of Esther, so I don't want to go into detail. But can I ask you one question about, if you are a man, you can also identify, doesn't have to be only gendered. Which character do you identify with? Is it Esther or is it Vashti? Are you a straight shooter and boldly declaring no? Or are you sort of more discreet and you hold your card close to your heart? You don't reveal your agenda, but you do it in a series, little by little. You drop crumbs. You don't show the whole picture. So if I were to characterize 2 figures that way, which one are you? You can write on the chat box or you can unmute. You don't want to share? Are you holding your card close to your heart?
I guess I would say I'm Esther.
Where are you? I don't see you.
Oh, in the corner.
Okay.
At least I'm in the corner of my screen, so.
That means you're shrewd.
Oh, is Esther? I thought Vashti was the one who was shrewd.
Both were shrewd in different way. Vashti was a straight shooter. No, I'm not going to show up to the banquet. And then she organized alternate palace women's banquet.
Sure.
Whereas Esther just made her opponent restless, sleepless. Talk about different kinds of power wielding. Esther was really shrewd. Which one is more like the bull in the china shop? Whose question? Who is Eric?
That's me up here. I have my camera off.
A camera off. That's more like Vashti, don't you
Okay.
think? Yes. Why do you see yourself that way?
It's been a long day, and I've been working on some accounting, so I feel it's not bending to my will. So right now I'm feeling like the bull in the china.
So if you're Vashti, you would say, I've had a long day, I'm exiting.
Okay.
I'm not asking you to exit, but that's what Vashti would do.
Well, I might stick around, but I wouldn't be in a great mood.
Mm-hmm. That's your call. Anybody else?
I always thought of Esther as someone who worked within the system. She tried to bring change by staying in and was shrewd about that. And I think that was reflective of, I try to work in the system to bring change. So sometimes I see myself more of an Esther than a Vashti. Although I'm a great admirer of Vashti. I think she's strong.
She is strong, so is Esther.
Yeah.
And I think the art of navigating the system requires more like Esther's skill set and how she partnered with Mordecai, and then how she charmed the king, and even boldly showing up without even him summoning her to show up, which was the rule. So she violates rule with a sweet smile and charm. That's my younger sister. Placating the system and milking the system without the system knowing that she's milking the system. That's an art, artistry. But more like a bull in the china shop. Everybody knows what you're up to. But I don't want to denigrate that kind of moment. I'm more Jungian in terms of psychology. And in fact, Carl Jung got all of his archetype from Lao Tzu's Taoism. So Dr. Park mentioned about in her sermon, broken world, and we are all broken. Answer to that is becoming whole. So if we only have one-dimensional tool in our tool shed, Vashti, showing up every occasion like Vashti, no matter what the situation is, that's not enough. But there are moments in our life that calls for, if I don't say no straightforward right now, I feel like I'm going to die. I'm selling my soul. I am being co-opted. So I'm going to just say no, period. And I might even organize community to thwart some of the power elite schemes, even if I die tomorrow. But there's a moment that calls forth Esther's tactic. I think I mentioned yesterday that I am not a man hater. In fact, many men empowered me more so than any Asian American woman I can think of, because I'm older, so no other woman could have mentored me or accompanied me. In becoming whole, I want this binary comparison between Vashti and Esther into one person. how are we wearing both sides of, do I want to be Vashti within and Esther without? Or sometimes do I want to be like a Vashti without, Esther within? And what are the circumstances that's calling me forth? What menu do I need to show up with? So becoming whole, according to Carl Jung and Jungian psychology, means, am I in touch with my masculine side? Woman's masculine side is not the same as male masculinity. You know, that whole anima and animus. So prime example, without naming his name, that we are still suffering under polarized America, is that lack of integrated wholeness, but toxicity, toxic masculinity, this guy keeps on going with. I dominate, I bully, therefore I am. But there's that kind of person, if you really exercise more like Esther, the soft side, feminine side of men, if you're a bird watcher in a football dominant image as a boy, then you feel like you're a sissy. That's American culture. But you have to show your force, like those king and the palace, you know, king's party people, drunkenness. That's what masculinity that is promoted in the media and sports. So men in general do not have permission to be in touch with their feminine side. And what it means to be a human being and leader is becoming integrated with both, in case of woman, both feminine and masculine. And in case of man, yes, both masculine and feminine side of man. Believe me, feminine side of the men is not feminine. And we don't have that permission. So there's a great example of the feminine side of men is, let me illustrate. In Japan, in the marketplace, two men ended up fighting, arguing, and they couldn't settle their argument verbally. So the other man proposed, can we settle this with a sword match in a week? It turns out the guy who proposed sword match in a week turns out to be the son of the best warrior. And this poor guy has never even touched a sword before. So what would you do in that case? Do you sign up how to use sword one-on-one class for 1 week? So this man decided, okay, I'm gonna die in a week. But the only option I want to pursue is to die with dignity. So he went to Buddhist monk, and this is the situation. And in a week, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna be slaughtered like an animal. But can you help me how to die with some dignity? You know, Buddhist monk asked 3 times, same question. Are you ready to die? Yes, I have no doubt. I just don't want to be slaughtered. I want to die with some dignity. Repeat 3 times. Here's what you do. When you show up in a week to the marketplace, show up 15 minutes before the matching time and buy yourself a sword and lift up the sword high and keep your eyes closed. And the rule of the game is you cannot pierce sword from the back. It has to be either from the side or from the front. So his opponent shows up right on time and see a man ready to die. And this poor man was advised by the Buddhist monk, when you feel the sword piercing into your side or front, you just put down your sword. So he was ready to do that. But as the opponent, as warrior's son, he noticed the energy of the guy who is ready to die. So he canceled the match. I die, you die. So he knew that. So he canceled the match. I know many times I have run into, and I myself was too, radicalized by teaching in seminary, not Central Baptist. And they're ready to attack and tackle anything that comes in their way. I find through my life journey, extreme right and extreme left are the same. They are both ideologue, and you cannot dialogue with them. And I think the journey of becoming whole, the lesson Queen Vashti and Queen Esther really depict is discerning. When do I get to be like Vashti for my soul and for my humanity and not be co-opted? And when do I game the system with smile and get the power elite restless and sleepless, talk about power, dance of power? When do I move forward and backward and sideways? That requires inward journey, not just outward journey. That is this time for me to move forward or retreat, or to be silent, or to speak up? Wouldn't you agree, Pam, that a bulk of leadership is when do I speak in what manner so that the listeners can attend to what you are saying? When do I line up all the ducks in a row rather than just jumping into the situation? What about all the backlash? So some of these are not really taught, but I found 48 Laws of Power, the best New York Times best-selling book. It's not Christian book, but it has this artistry. And I find myself interpreting from that book what the seminary curriculum doesn't teach. So I want to leave some time for interaction. I don't like monologuing, but I think basically becoming whole is the key here. And that requires journey of vulnerability, courage, and community organizing, and the spirit of Purim, fasting, and even if I perish, I perish. I don't know how much time we have left, but I just find diversifying our menu and understanding our audience and the context and interpreting what the context requires of me. Is this my turn to speak? Or is it better for me to deploy male colleague rather than me trying to do? So all of these are like a dance of change. I want to just leave some room for interaction if there's a time.
Yes, there's plenty of time.
We have so many women on this call who are immigrants or first generation, second generation Americans who've experienced leading from the margin. I'm really curious about some of your stories. I could call you out, but I won't do that. But I would love to hear what leadership looks like for you. Vashti, Esther, how do you resonate with what Young has said?
Let me be more concrete. When and why and how have you resisted authority? Have you ever done that?
I think the first time that ever happened in my life, I was 18 years old and felt a sense of calling to teach. I was in my freshman year at Baylor University, and I knew I had a calling to something. I couldn't figure out what it was. But in my New Testament class, I realized this is what I was called to do, is to be a part of theological education. And my Southern Baptist father, when I told him I was going to change my major to religion, said, no, you can't do that because, and he didn't finish the sentence, but because I was a woman, I could not do this. And that was the first time I ever rebelled against him in my life. I majored in religion anyway. And here I am, because I said no, quietly, just went to the registrar and did it. So registrars empower people to live into their call.
I'll give you a tip. This is as recent, my Zoom with one of my Asian American woman mentee, and I'm not going to reveal which school she is enrolled in. And this is a marvelous example. The faculty she's taking the class from, I know. And so she noticed that all the assignments are from complementarian position. So she boldly raised her hand in the classroom and she said, how come you're only making us read only complementarian? You've got to introduce us diverse positions. That was number one. Number two, she organized women in the class and they are meeting separately. Sounds like a Vashti. And number three, she proposed complementarian theology position assignment into, I'm gonna do the Holy Spirit, man and woman in ministry. That will be my paper. So if he gives me F, let it be, but that's what I'll do. So she even changed his assignment. She's a leader.
I was just thinking how much I appreciate this call to wholeness and the actions of Vashti and Esther, and was thinking that to become whole in that way is also gaming the system in some ways. It's a subversive act to become whole in the midst of a system that wants to degrade or deny dignity or not allow wholeness.
And woman cannot be assertive. When women like this female MDiv student, she is seen as aggressive. But when men even pound the table, that's called assertive and that's leadership. Even if you bully, that creates followers, right? So it all depends on what kind of framework is being imposed upon women. You know, assumption here is women are to be what? Sweet, kind, gentle, and those women get to be awarded and rewarded. So often, how many minutes do I have? I'm very time conscious.
Got about 30 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
If you want to take that whole time, and if not, that's okay too.
You know, if you apply this to the image of Jesus, and I find this to be hilarious. In majority white setting, I give assignment. Can you fill out 6 adjectives Jesus is and fill it out? And let's do it right now. 6 adjectives that you can think of. Jesus is. There's no right or wrong answer, so relax.
Inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. Oh, sorry. Bold.
Jesus is what?
Bold.
Bold.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Inclusive, bold, fair.
Passionate,
What's that?
compassionate,
Compassionate. What else?
He's also, I think, I see him as a revolutionary, like a
Revolutionary. Yay! One more. We have Jesus is include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, okay. Then let's take stereotypes of what the society defines as masculine and feminine. So let's label inclusive. Is it more masculine or feminine?
I'd say feminine
Mm-hmm.
if I was going to put it in a category.
Yeah, fair. Neutral.
oh yeah, bold.
Bold.
Masculine, I think.
Passionate.
Bold.
Masculine or feminine? I'm forcing you to categorize in binary fashion here, but passionate could be masculine, compassionate could be feminine,
Yeah.
revolutionary. The society stereotypes that as masculine, right?
Yes. Yes.
I find it fascinating when I did this exercise in all Asian American setting, all 6 of them, merciful, compassionate, gentle, kind, sacrificial, you name it, all 6 came out feminine. So how we view our reality, we also project to our image of Jesus and God. So once again, I think examining our unexamined assumption about who God is, who Jesus is, who the Holy Spirit is, affects how we practice Christianity and how we stand in the world. Do we need special permission to be revolutionary because we are women? No. We ought to be also as assertive and revolutionary and become active in bringing justice in this world. But if we are only sweet, gentle, sacrificial, merciful, then we don't have permission to become whole. So that's where how society elevates feminine women and defines feminine in the way that benefits men. As long as women remain obedient, sweet, and passionate and placating, who benefits? What's your smile? Rochelle.
I'm receiving. I'm enjoying what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
so,
yeah.
As long as we do that, then it's male who benefits. And if I were to take this to even theology, let's say, and how word is so powerful. You know why there's no flourishing Asian American church-based theology? It all comes down to one word: syncretism. The word syncretism was invented to describe non-Western cultures' relationship with the gospel and Christianity. And the Western context and Western culture was synonymous to Christianity. So many people of color do not have permission to theologize. I've read so many demon dissertations, and they describe coming out of Korea, all the problems in that context. But because of the word syncretism, they don't quote from Korean Minjung theologian or Korean, indigenous theology. They delegitimize what's not white. So this internalized colonialism in theological realm is live and well even today. So they describe very particular contextual issues of the ministry in Korea, and then they quote nothing but Calvin and Luther. So there's dissonance happening there. So let me just take this to the personal level. When was the last time you changed your own script of how you see yourself? Or are you just continuing faithfully to what everybody else shoved down software to you? You are like this, you are like that. But have you ever done your inner work of editing who I am and who I am becoming, and becoming revolutionary way of defining who you are and who you are becoming? Have you done that homework? So I'm moving from theology, our understanding of theology, to our personal narrative, who I think I am and I'm becoming, in light of two queens we saw, how they were transforming. And I'm wondering if you have done that. How many of you see yourself as the author of your own life? Can I see some hands? All right. And Eric, you were saying, I try to work on that often. How are you working that on?
It was brought home to me when I worked for an international manufacturing organization. And we had people of all faiths, Christian, Jewish, a few Wiccans, we had Buddhists, Shinto, and they were just like me. You know, so I try not to burn bridges before I get to know someone. I try not to be try not to put someone down because of where they're from or think I'm any better or any smarter or this is the way we do it here, so you have to do it that way. You know, in manufacturing, we've adopted many of the Japanese quality rules that I think the Koreans have also adopted. Mm-hmm. And to do it right, you have to learn something about the culture that came from. So I'm not saying, I don't feel like I'm saying this very well right now, but it's not all me based or us based or, you know, this is the way we do it because this is the way we do it, or this is the way Americans do it. It's more of, you know, how do we do this so that we can all be successful together?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So I learned, when I went to foreign countries, I tried to learn what the table manners were ahead of time. I tried to learn at least a smattering of the local languages, please and thank you, and greetings, hello, goodbye, good morning. The way that I would want to be treated when others came to visit me. I tried.
Yes, the golden rule, right? Well, thank you for your sharing. I think what I want to really highlight, as you are all in ministry and teaching as well, there's no way of bypassing who you are and who you are becoming. And my mantra in life is learn until you die. And unless we are healthy, and what I mean by healthy is, once again, balanced. In what area am I reactionary? And I need to catch myself. What was that about? So it's not about the other person I'm reacting against. It is about me. And there's a homework that I didn't finish. So I look within. And once I do that, I realized it wasn't just about that CEO. It was about my past experience with the CEO that was so unpleasant that I'm reacting. More than ever, I call it a pandemic humanity. After the Atlanta shooting, many Asian American women were lashing out. So I'm naming how our society is producing more of thick ego and emotionally fragile people, is what I have witnessed more and more during this pandemic. So what does it mean for us to be healthy and becoming whole? Means every day doing your homework and pointing finger at others less, but journey inward, downward, and upward. And Christianity has done a great job of externalizing God. But how do we internalize God? And with the Holy Spirit who dwells in us, defining myself within, with the Holy Spirit, indwelling Spirit of God. So, in conclusion, I do not get elated when people clap or praise. And I don't feel like I'm plummeting low when people criticize me. I'm as free as I can be because there's one Korean word, two Korean words I'll differentiate. There's a word called daejung and minjung. Daejung means the mass. Minjung means people, conscientized people. Mass can say anything one moment and turn around and say something else totally, right? So if your self-image hinges more upon external direction, you're going to be on a roller coaster because you have no control over what other people are going to say about you. So the best way that liberated myself is, it's from my own observation. This is crazy. She told me, great, one day, and next day she said, she's a rotten cabbage. There's no validity. So I'm not going to be on a roller coaster. I have no control over what she says about me. So from now on, I'm defining myself internally in the power of Holy Spirit who dwells in me. And once you do that, I think you can practice, if I perish, I perish. That emotional resilience hinges upon, well, this is such an important justice work. So if I die, I die. And in that case, nobody can intimidate you and threaten you, and you can really live life of truly revolutionary life every day. And number two, the key to health, your self-care, gratitude is the medicine. Gratitude because you can be thankful, the circumstance calls for it. No, unconditional gratitude. And seeing silver lining in every crisis. It's really fun if you live that way. Wow, what is it that I didn't see? But if you, by faith, there must be something good that will come out of this mess. And it does. So friends, that's the good news. If you accept the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of yourself, you don't have to live life on a roller coaster. You can be centered and nobody else can shake you. So that's lesson I learned from Queen Vashti, Queen Esther, to become whole. When do I show up like Vashti? When do I show up like Esther? It's your call. But we need both, not just one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hertig. I will be sitting with these many of your very wise words for a long time. I'm very appreciative of this workshop and your teaching today. And I have some books to read. And I'm looking forward to it.
This book came out of Asian American woman's journey in light of biblical female character. So there's Ruth and there's many others, and their leadership journey, their stories in light of biblical character. So If you're interested, check it out.
Sounds fantastic. I will check it out. Thank you.
Mhm.
And thank you for leading us today. I want to invite everyone back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Time to hear Dr. Hertig preach in our closing worship. It's the opening of the day, but the last worship of the gathering. And so we will get to hear from Dr. Hertig one more time. And so we're appreciative of that. We now have time for another break before we go into our next workshop. Our next workshop begins in about 23-ish minutes or so at 4 p.m. Central Time, where we will hear from Reverend Dr. Angie Jackson, Director of Development at Central Seminary, on the topic of "You Are Central to the Future." So please take a short break and stretch your legs and get something to eat or drink, and join us back here in just about a little over 20 minutes. Thank you.